Well, they say the truth will set you free, but sometimes the truth will keep you prisoner. I had found myself in not only a terrible situation, but one I could not even fathom. My father and I never truly saw eye to eye, and we weren't famously known for getting along. But how could I ever expect that he had something to do with all this? Did my mother know? He said she didn't, but maybe she knew more than she let on. But then again, he was my father, and had done a very good job at hiding his business from me my entire life, and my closest friends paid dearly for it. Apparently, siblings. Even as those guards escorted me away from that place, my father in tow behind them, I found my thoughts drifting to Heather. Looking back now, I know I was trying to keep my mind occupied. What was to happen next had me white-knuckling it through every second, and remembering the reasons why I did all of this in the first place helped me to keep my mind clear. How could he do this to his own daughter? His sons? His answers seemed satisfactory to him, but they sure as hell meant nothing to me. Up ahead, I spied the cart that we had passed earlier. The thought had crossed my mind then, but I was both still curious and hopeful. Well, now my curiosity was satisfied, and I hoped that my father was here to rescue me from what I had learned to be a literal hell. Well, the time for action would soon be upon me, and hesitation would have to be cast to the wind. Those last few steps seemed to take an eternity. 10 more steps. Would they already be prepared for what I was thinking? How many before me had tried this before? 5 more steps. My breath began to hitch, and my heart raced in my chest. I knew that what was about to happen, no matter the outcome, would change every moment in my life from here on out. 2 more steps to go. My vision began to blur, and I could quite literally feel my heart pounding through my ribcage. Time seemed to slow, as if my panicked observation seemed to distort my perception of time, drawing out each and every moment as my fear-stricken brain fought to take in every detail. The sound of every single foot hitting the ground. I counted 8 in total, including my own. The way the light reflected off the dirty linoleum floor below me, the filth obscuring everything but shadows. Including myself, there were 3. 2 to my left, and 1 to my right. There was the glint of the pushcart, or rather what was on it. That being some old rags, a few dirty trays, and a long metal rod of some sort, and a large knife, almost like a meat cleaver. I had never thought or hoped I'd ever be in the position to attack my father with such violence and without prejudice. But here I was. And the pushcart was now within reach of my right hand. I knew that this was my chance. I wasn't out to fatally injure anyone, but I knew that I couldn't hold back, not if I was to have a chance against 3 adults. I lunged for the knife. Luckily, they hadn't been expecting it after all, for if they had, they would have stopped me before I could even reach it. My hand gripped the handle as soon as I felt someone grab a hold of me from behind. I spun and stuck the blade to the hilt directly into the side abdomen wall of one of the burly guards. But before I could withdraw the blade, my hand was clasped onto by another, and then another. It was the other guard, and my father. I desperately tried to hold on to the knife, but it was no use. The guard I had stabbed held fast to the knife as the other guard and my father tackled me to the floor. My hand gripped the edge of the cart, and it too came crashing to the floor with us, its contents scattering across the floor. My father and the remaining guard, not nursing a wound, began pinning me to the floor. I reached out with my only free hand and gripped something long and rigid. I had no idea what it was, but it felt like a big metal baton. I flung it back and forth wildly, trying to catch a glance at anyone. It bounced effortlessly off them both, affecting neither of them. I squeezed harder and swung. There was a loud electrical crackle, a yelp like a dog had been kicked, and then, much of the pressure keeping me on the floor, released. I was able to spin myself over, only to see my father now holding me down. The injured guard began to approach me. I stuck out the metal rod and squeezed again. The second time I squeezed it, I felt the trigger click. In an instant, the guard was down. I now realized I was holding a cattle prod, and with intent, I turned to face my father. However, it was too late. Dad was ready for me and gripped the rod about the middle, and easily overpowered me and my attack. The prod clicked and crackled as I frantically pressed the button, but Dad effortlessly kept it far from his skin. He reached down with his free arm, and I began to panic, reaching on the ground again to find anything that I might grip. Near the guard, I indeed grasped something rigid and cold. I lifted it without looking and pointed it at my father. I'm pretty sure I had realized it was a gun by the time I pulled the trigger. But I also knew I wasn't intending to kill my father outright. Again, I simply panicked, and with a quick, mindless squeeze, my father dropped to the floor beside me. I ran halls of various length and width, and as I hadn't seen a window to the outside world in all that time, I assumed that I was underground in a sublevel, and was therefore searching desperately for stairs. More than once, I could hear the clatter of boots fast approaching from around a corner, ahead or behind me, and more than once I ducked behind a doorway or a trash can in the hall, allowing the sounds to pass. I knew they were looking for me. 3 of their men were dead, and it was my fault. One of those men being my father, and no matter what was happening at the present, I couldn't shake that image from my mind. That hole in his chest, the pool of blood that spread around him, and his lifeless, unmoving form. I knew I would grieve. I knew I should be sad, and even in my heightened state, I knew I was in shock. When and if I ever survived this, I would be dealing with the repercussions of what I had done for the rest of my life. I must have only been scurrying about the place for maybe 15 minutes or so. The way my mind seemed to slow down time, the dream state I found myself in, I wouldn't have been surprised to find out it was actually days. What seemed to me like an eternity later, I rounded a hall and saw something that made my heart leap with anticipation. At the end of this dimly lit corridor, lined with closed doors on both sides, was a lone, steel ladder, beside an open-faced, caged-in freight elevator. I needed to get out of here, and I knew that this was my only shot. I stealthily but quickly made my way towards the ladder and elevator, hoping to remain undetected long enough for me to abscond. But only a few feet away, I once again heard the clatter of footsteps. It was low and seemingly distant at first, but they were fast approaching, and there weren't many places to hide. However, that didn't mean that there were none. Along the length of the ceiling in this particular hall was nothing but exposed pipes and ductwork. Of course, each was far too small for me to even fit an arm inside of, but it was so cluttered and low enough to the floor that I could reach the pipes and climb above the clutter, obstructing vision from the floor. I had to lay down and squeeze into it, but I managed to pull myself into position just as the sets of boots rounded the corner of the hallway, not far from where I had just been standing. I found myself holding my breath and hoping they wouldn't hear the latent sound of my racing heartbeat. I know I did, but as they walked closer, it became easy to see that these two men weren't even looking for me. They were walking calm, having casual conversation, and stopped short at the door right below me. Inserting a large key into an iron lock, one of the men unlatched the door and pushed it open. At first, all I could hear was sobbing and the sounds of panic, but I soon heard a loud electrical zap, a truncated scream, and the laughter of two deep voices. Moments later, I saw those two men dragging something from within the door. I could see inside of the room. It appeared much like the one that I was placed in, and the person the two men dragged from that room looked like they couldn't be any older than I was. It was a boy, about my age. He appeared thin and pale, and for some reason, he was dressed in a pristine pink dress. What the hell? I thought to myself. The client's going to be pretty happy with this one, huh? He works, he cleans, and he only screams a little when he's fucked. The one guard blurted out loud, and the other chuckled. That's when I understood why Heather and Jason were taken, and for what purposes. I imagined what my friends must have endured before each making an escape from this hell, and how Jason and Heather must have felt when they were found and dragged back to this place. I needed to get help. So many people needed my help here. I waited for the men to round the corner with their half-conscious victim, and once they were completely gone from sight and sound, I quietly climbed back down and made my way to the elevator. Unfortunately, I discovered that the elevator needed a key. However, the ladder did not. So, I made my ascent, expecting to be found out at any moment, with every rung. But they didn't. At least, not until I had climbed the 10 or so feet and through the hatch above. Peeking my head up through the hole in the floor, I could finally see daylight coming in from the front windows, set high into the walls here. It was daytime outside. As I pulled my body up and through, I began looking around. I could hear the sounds of cladding feet below me, shouting commands I still could not quite make out. Time was up. They'd found me. I scanned even faster now. I was in some sort of large garage. Farm equipment sat all around me, as well as a few 55-gallon drums full of unknown contents, and a few gas cans. I didn't even look, but I could tell that they were nearly at the base of the ladder now. Beside the cans was an old truck, and upon running over and looking inside, I saw what I hoped I would. Most utility trucks carry roadside emergency kits. I opened the door, snatched it with one hand, and grabbed a half-full can of gas with the other. Not hesitating at all, I ran back to the trapdoor and began dumping the contents of the gas can down through the aperture. Voices from below could be heard cursing, warning others that it was gas, and the sounds of liquid slapping against a hard surface. Again, without looking, I opened the road kit and pulled free a long and thin red stick. A road flare. I struck the top, and the flare roared into life. I don't even think I stuck around long enough for the thing to even land on anything. I simply dropped the flare and ran. The sounds of screaming could be heard from behind me as I climbed up and escaped through one of those high windows. I once thought I heard the sounds of others inside, at the surface level. If I was correct, they were preoccupied with those burning to death down below, supposedly engulfing both the ladder and the elevator in flames. Once outside, screams and shouts too distant now to reach my ears. The world fell into a peaceful quiet of birds chirping and insects buzzing. But I knew better. I knew the hell that I had just escaped, and how nothing could be further from the truth. It would be a long time before I made it to a distant house where I felt comfortable enough to place a phone call to the police, and although I had escaped, due to the truths I had sought out and learned, I knew that I would never be the same.
Well, they say the truth will set you free, but sometimes learning the truth will keep you prisoner forever. But I hope you're not kept prisoner for too long and can stop back here next Saturday for more gore galore. So until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.